Howdy, y'all. My name is Scott. I'm the author of Rivet Stone, and I may be just some author, but let me tell you, you're going to be going through your writing journey, and you're probably going to hear this term white room syndrome. And it's like, okay, like people tell me to avoid it, but like, what and why? So, what white room syndrome means is that if you take a scene, or it could be action scene, or just typically like a dialogue based scene, and you put it into a completely blank white room, and if the dialogue still makes sense, then congratulations, you have white room syndrome. And what's bad about that is that no longer are your characters actually like interacting with their world. It's not grounded in that location. Instead, it's just a bunch of people talking, which is cool. I mean, you could do that. And that's something that's been a real challenge for me because my second novel is a lot more dialogue driven. But one quick tip in order to incorporate the location and make dialogue more interesting so you don't have this white room syndrome is to give your characters something to do. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm not saying you have to like make this like, oh, and now they're juggling at the same time and they're running away. Like, no, it doesn't have to be a super elaborate thing. But let's take, for example, like, let's say two characters are, you need to have a dialogue scene at someone's house. So instead of just them, walking into the door and then just standing there being like, yes, uh-huh, or maybe if you're feeling really elaborate, they sit down at a table and then they talk for 3 pages and then get up and leave. You know, I, it's probably not going to be that boring, but there's a lot of things that we can do, some actions that we can give our characters that will kind of ground them in that location and break up the monotony of the he said, she said by the seashore. So for example, one thing that I like to do is that if they're talking like indoors at someone's house, they go to the kitchen or they go to the dining room table and perhaps they have a meal or maybe they're making drinks. So that gives the opportunity for your characters to, instead of talking, maybe they look down at the food, they take a couple of bites, they comment on the flavors. Maybe there's a scent of something baking on the other side of the room. Or perhaps they're like making tea and they hear the kettle burning on the other side by the stove and they get up to go check on it and they pour it and they hear it. And even just these little tiny things of maybe they're actually like walking from one room to another. You just need to give them something to do. Now, you may come into a situation where you're like, well, actually there's nothing that they can do in this scene. That's and it may be best to do a more high level retextualization of that actual scene. So maybe instead of them, having this conversation taking place like, I don't know, sitting or standing outside their front door, like, is there a way you could do it while they're driving at the same time? Or is there a way that you could combine some scenes so that they're, saying whatever dialogue they need to kind of get out for the reader or for the story, but then also progressing the story along? And, there's, like I said, it really does depend on the exact environment and location of your story. But just thinking about giving, your characters and making sure that they have something to do while they're talking is really going to make your dialogue a lot more interesting and a lot more grounded. So hopefully that helped, and let's get published.